Hello there, welcome to this extra special podcast I'm doing for the channel. You may notice our guest, SJSarts, who's actually this side of me. We're going the wrong direction. Who you've probably seen this podcast a few times before. He's also got his own channel, SJSarts, which used to be SJS Films. So, hello there.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this challenging subject.
Yep, thanks. We kept you and the ginger one separate because we know how much he likes to talk. So we're nice to let you get a word in edgeways with him not around.
Yeah, it's hard for me to talk with him because he takes all the space.
Yeah. So I thought it'd be better to give you your own platform rather than just have him. Yeah. And anyone who saw the podcast I did with Isaac, you will know that we went way off topic and to an extreme that you never thought was probably possible. So hopefully this will be more on topic. So hopefully this will not go as insane. But I think you're much more disciplined than Isaac, so I think we'll maybe okay.
Yeah. And I think this is the kind of topic that it's harder to go off topic, maybe.
Give me a couple of minutes. I can push it off topic. Don't underestimate me.
Yeah. But we won't talk about Martin Scorsese this time, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to do that with this subject. Okay, so we're doing political propaganda films as the subject we're going to talk about. Because it's a subject that comes up a lot, like, is this propaganda for someone's point of view? Is this like state propaganda, or is it ideological propaganda? Propaganda covers everything. There's lots of actions of propaganda for almost anything in cinema now, just because everyone's always got their point of view, and anyone is not your point of view is propaganda. But before that, it was usually was state propaganda. But we're going to do a discussion, talk about all sorts of propaganda and all sorts of films. That's a general idea. And we're both watching like films with propagandist elements in them. You know, I watched one film that was pretty dodgy. And I've seen some other films in this subject that are pretty dodgy. What about yourself?
Yeah, I watched a couple of films for this, and I've seen obviously propaganda films before, but I wouldn't say that I'm like an expert on this issue or anything, but I've seen lots of different types of propaganda from the fascist side and then the communist side, and then there's the modern propaganda as well.
Yeah, it's all over the place. I actually looked at some lists of propaganda films, what people think nowadays is propaganda, and it's like, this is not propaganda. This is just films that have a different point of view from you. It's not propaganda, not the way that I think propaganda is, which we are trying to actually change the way people think. I think nowadays people think propaganda is anything they don't agree with, really, rather than statewide censorship, which is a bit more insidious, really. So
yeah, I think some people might argue that anything that is political could be propaganda, but I don't think so.
No, because I mean, you can do political in different ways. You can be political and be nuanced, or you can be political and just say my tribe is the best option. You know, how you go to defining your tribe as the only option, that's when you start to go towards propaganda. But there's all sorts of kinds. So, so we start on the kind of really obvious ones, the ones that are kind of hard to deny as propaganda.
Maybe we should start in the beginning, so the Bird of a Nation. So I watched this like a week ago as well. So.
Oh yeah, this was we both watched this film for this podcast, and that was quite traumatic. And so, what was your take on it? I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so obviously everyone knows that this is a racist film from the 1910s, and it was really racist as the kind of as the like the what's the word as its reputation says. But yeah,
I thought it was actually more racist than I expected. I expected some racism, but this was way more than I expected.
Yeah, the second half especially is the more racist half, I think, and yeah, it makes black people seem that they are just kind of violent and anarchic and stupid and more inferior to white people. But still, this film has some merits, obviously, because cinema would look very different if this film never happened, and I could appreciate the visual aspects, and I think it was quite epic and even thrilling at some points, but obviously the racist stuff makes it not enjoyable.
Yeah, it's also there's so much blackface in it too. Like anytime they want to have someone say something a black person probably wouldn't be okay with, they got a white actor put in blackface, and you can instantly tell it was always really cringeworthy. Like the person who was a black rapist was obviously a guy in blackface, really. And there's a lot of, kind of cringe there, but yeah, I mean it's so patronizing towards anyone who's not white, and it's so the kind of upper classes of the American whites are so easily offended, by anything that's not there. They're so easy to take offense to anybody. They could almost be like people on the internet today, really, because they're so full of themselves and so like. Literally, when I was watching, I was thinking, these are little people you see on the internet. These kind of everything self-justification, and you see the cycles of history. Like anybody who comes from a kind of pampered class tends to think the same way, and you always create enemies of people who are coming up, and you think you have to defend yourself against. And there's that kind of feeling to the film of like there's like a panic about, oh my god, these people might get rights. Oh no. And it's human rights, for God's sake. But there's that kind of feeling of this kind of cringy, it makes you really embarrassed to be white watching that film. Because you're thinking, we're not all that bad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and this is one of those propaganda films that actually made people do stuff. So this kind of influenced many people to be violent against black people, and again the kind of rise of KKK as well. And so this is one of those examples that really had the influence on real life. Maybe some of these propaganda films, they tried to have an influence, but they didn't. But this one really had. So
yeah, no, it was just it was aiming for that was the worst part of it. They're saying we're not doing that, but they have characters who start off as being semi-decent, and then they turn out to be the leaders of the Ku Klux Klan by the end of it. And all the characters who you're meant to be kind of you're meant to be rooting for turn out to be the worst Klan members, and the people who are there for actual racial diversity become like the villains, and it's like, oh my god, this is so bad. This is so, and it's just this fear. I think when you get a lot of propaganda films, there's a kind of fear that goes through the film, kind of nervousness. They're trying too hard to push their point of view. So one thing I've noticed with propaganda films, they don't seem that confident. Like they can't take any criticism. It's something I've noticed also in the Soviet films too. There is a kind of just nervousness about them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think one of the interesting questions about this film is that whether the racism comes from the script that Griffith didn't wrote, or does it come from the director? Yeah.
I think it comes from the script, but also the director should have known better. The director should have said, look, this is not right. We can't do this. But he never did anything, so he gets lumped in. But yeah, I mean, it did cause actual violence to a lot of people. And it was trying to ignore, it's doing a film about the Civil War, and it's trying to ignore what the Civil War was actually about. Really, which is kind of it's completely immoral,
Yeah, and Griffith also made this kind of short film that was really racist against the Native Americans. But then after Bird of a Nation, he did Intolerance that could kind of be seen as an apology about this racist stuff. So it's kind of hard to tell, but I think he probably was a racist. So yeah.
Yeah, because apparently one of his biographers said, no, he didn't get it. He was doing this to film Intolerance, but he didn't get that he'd been intolerant himself. It never clicked to him that what people complain about. He just thought they were being talking towards him. It's like, no, you're kind of a scumbag. And the thing is, when I know these kind of propaganda films, they all use like melodrama and these melodramatic techniques to the characters are pure, so you're meant to be the kind of thing you get in a normal Hollywood film, which is a character you identify with. It's used for characters you really don't want to identify with, but they don't get that that's a problem, and it becomes this kind of weird thing watching them from a distance, because you can see how people might get caught up in that if they kind of tied to that kind of mindset that, oh, we're the good guys in this film, showing it and proving it. And it's like, that's where it gets really insidious as well.
Yeah, and these films just have a really kind of simplified view of everything. Like it's always just this group is perfect and this other group is completely evil, and so it really shows the lack of any kind of nuanced thinking or any kind of ability to reason or have logic.
Yeah, no, I mean, what's annoying is Birth of a Nation is a very well-made film, especially for its time, but it's utterly objectionable. I mean, because I watched that and I watched Napoleon soon after it, and Napoleon was such a better film as well. But at least with Napoleon, Napoleon was a nutcase, and the film shows he's a nutcase. And it's like, it's not trying to tell you, yeah, it's a bit patriotic, but it's not saying, hey, don't be uncritical of Napoleon. Yeah, he was a loony. You know, not like this, where the characters are all meant to be pure and they're trying to prove a point, and it's easy enough to do it even silent films. Even then, you could have done a complicated thing. You could have done a complicated look at the Ku Klux Klan and the racial tension, and you could have done something really, really good with it. But instead, they just took it and just made anybody who doesn't agree with us, anyone who thinks that the whites of the South weren't hard done by must be wrong. You're like, no, they were racist. Come on. It's just weird to watch that. But it's interesting to see it in a different point of view that's just completely insane. You know.
Yeah, and it's really disturbing how sophisticated it is and how beautifully shot it is and how perfect it is technically for the time. But then that kind of can sometimes mask the evil agenda behind these films, because often pretty much all of these examples that I have look really good and they are technically perfect, but then they have these hideous ideologies in them.
Yeah. So shall we go into the Russian Revolution then, which just came just after it, or just around at the same time as this? Which, because obviously the Russians were really into cinema at the time, especially in the 1920s, and they're trying to prove their revolution was worthwhile, even though they're killing each other still. So you got the Eisenstein films like Battleship Potemkin in October, which were looking at the revolution in a very simplified way. You know, one of my pet peeves really of Russian films is they're kind of boring. They're well made, but they're so idealistic to one point of view that they actually become kind of very dry very quickly, because there's no nuance to them at all. I used to get all these in film school, and I was just a dread we get the Russian ones, because it was just like, yeah, they're so well made, but a lot of the time there's nothing there for you.
Yeah, I find them pretty enjoyable, even though I find the ideology of communism very disgusting, but I can still enjoy these films. I think the kind of montage, Russian montage thing makes them kind of thrilling and interesting, and kind of interesting pieces of history. But again, the ideology behind them is very simplified. It's the workers against upper class. All the upper class are evil, and all the workers are victims or heroes. And it's again a very simplified version of the real human nature. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, because human nature is not like that at all, is it? I mean, it's whatever class you go to, you're going to have like good people and bad people. That's just the way people are. And but that's kind of propaganda. It's almost like they're trying to prove we were right for doing this. We were right for killing all these people and doing all these executions. And even though we're still fighting each other, we're right to do this. So you get something like Battleship Potemkin, which is a really thrilling film. It's a really good film. But then when you get to October, which I find a really dull film. I just find it, hard to sit through because it's just longer and it feels much more monotonous and it doesn't have the same momentum as Potemkin. You've already seen this kind of, and I also think it's much more of a propaganda film. It's like, we were right. And it's just like, I think it's ramming its point home so much. You're thinking, no, you weren't. You really weren't. History's proving you wrong. But yeah, because I mean, the thing we should point out that communism is the biggest mass murdering ideology ever. It beats Nazism, which is hard to beat, but communism managed it. And they're
And
meant
it
to
beats it
represent
by
the
a mile. Yeah.
I know. I mean, they're meant to be representing people, and they're the ones that killed their own people most because communism doesn't work so well when people talk back to you, and the only way of dealing with that is killing them. And it's like that's the kind of base of the problem with communism is it's like it's no good for people because people are disagreeable. People cause lots of nuance by lots of different arguments, lots of different points of view, and communism doesn't do well with that. So you can get these propaganda films, but one of the reasons why most people don't watch them, apart from technically, is they don't relate to human nature at all. Really, does that make sense?
Yeah, and the evils of communism go well beyond just the murdering. Like, there's no human rights. Like, freedom of speech doesn't exist. The people are starving.
Yes.
And even like the people's homes are all kind of shit, and everything is like worse than in other countries, basically. So,
yeah, no, I mean, like
the gulags are like, I think some historians say they are even worse than like the concentration camps with Nazi Germany, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I'm a lefty, but I'm not that kind of lefty. That's kind of like, to me, that's like, oh no, that's way too far. You don't want to go there. As soon as someone says they've got communist sympathy, you start to think, oh, you're kind of stupid. You're just kind of, you're not very bright.
And it's
sorry
really
to all my
disgusting
communists.
I was just going to say that it's really disgusting how popular the ideology is still to this day. So
I know. I mean, you wouldn't get that the Nazis' ideology is rightly looked upon as disgusting. The racist ideology of buffer nation is rightly viewed as utterly reprehensible and disgusting. I mean, we all know these are wrong. Like, you should not support this stuff. But communism gets a free pass because apparently they're fighting for the people, even though they're not really. It starts out that way and becomes something else pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, but these films are kind of they did create this kind of wave of like montage, and also the idea of like subversion through montage and like subliminal imagery and all that stuff that became theories that never really took hold until like the 70s with like paranoid movies. Before then, it was always like a theory that you would discuss and like but the one thing the Russians were really good at was making lots of marching films and just creating this sense of they were invulnerable, but it was just like an image. I mean, it's almost pure propaganda because it's an image that has nothing to do with the reality. I'm not sure I've explained that right.
yeah, I think so. And like I watched a couple of Eisenstein films in the last week or so. So I watched October a few days ago, and you said that it was boring, and I think I liked it, but again, it's not as exciting as Potemkin, and I think Potemkin is the best one. But
Yeah.
even in October, they even show Finland for a bit because the Russian Revolution led to the independence of Finland. So
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting for myself. But yeah, the film itself it tracks a bit, but I think it's still pretty good and entertaining in some ways.
Yeah. It's I'm probably as hard in October. October just drove me mad. See, I used to get all this stuff when I was a film student, all about the Russian stuff and the propagandists, and it was quite interesting to watch because they were all talking about how like capitalism was bad and how capitalism manipulated the people with all these advertisements and stuff. And you know, like, but then they were doing themselves via basically their propaganda was basically marketing for their own ideology. Ultimately, they were still using the same techniques they were criticizing other people for, but they were not going to admit that they're using the same techniques that the West uses for like capitalism. It's still the same thing. It's like lying about the imagery. What does imagery mean? What we're trying to tell you to believe. It's always the same thing of whoever's in power is going to try and tell you what to believe, ultimately. So the whole world's propaganda, ultimately, but there are some extremes that are really obvious. I think that sounds a really, really cynical thing.
Yeah.
But it's kind of true.
Yeah.
So we've gone to Russian. Now we can go on to the Nazis, who have picked the ball up from communism for having lots of people marching in cinema. You know, like fascists love their marching men. Basically, they're really they've got a thing about that, and the kind of pure body thing and the pure ideology of someone looking up to the sky and imagining something amazing which the state will create for them magically. That's kind of, it's almost like the imagery of like propaganda. It's always someone looking up. You know, it's an idealistic viewpoint.
Yeah, I watched Triumph of the Will for this podcast, and that's probably the most famous Leni Riefenstahl film. And again, that shows the marching people, but in a very sophisticated way. Those like beautiful wide shots, like they rival almost like Paths of Glory, and they also show the German troops like they take showers and all, and they show the kind of unity and the collective and the power of the German group. And yeah, it's all about the collectivism and the kind of superiority and the order.
Yeah. I think you can probably tell that both me and SJS are not like collectivists like, at all. We're not really.
No, I'm a hardcore individualist. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably more towards that as well. A little, even though I'm kind of lefty, I'm still kind of. I believe in the free speech and things as a way to do things. And yeah, I mean, it's really. I mean, Triumph of the Will does that, and it keeps on going, and it becomes this. Some of the stuff is shot is beautiful, but it is kind of really creepy at the same time. You're really watching it and going, because it is like all this mindlessness of the image and more image and more image, and there's the beauty of the image, but it's not really for anything. It's just for suggesting the purity of the soul for the German people. It's trying to convince them that they're right. There's nothing objective about it, about humanity in any way. It's just about what our dreams are for the future, and this film will be the encapsulation of it. Because the Germans were all into the mountaineering and all into the physical health, and Riefenstahl loved all that stuff, and they were just into body beautiful and purism and all the stuff that caused them to like hate anybody who wasn't like the Aryan god. Really, it was just this kind of madness that went through the German culture because they'd been so beaten down by World War One that it just went completely insane. And this film's like the perfect version of that, or the perfect version of this madness, really. Because it's crazy film you watch it. It's really crazy.
Yeah, the film is full of these random political speeches and by Hitler and all of his kind of high-ranking officers and other people. But I actually had to watch this film without subtitles, so I didn't know what they were talking about in the speeches. But the title cards were in English, but I didn't know what they were talking about. But probably something really evil.
I've watched it with subtitles. I had a DVD. And it was just nonsense. You didn't need to hear what they're saying. It was just nonsense. It was just the purity of the race. But that's one thing you find about in all these, like the propaganda films. Whenever someone makes a speech, it's usually nonsense. It's usually utter gibberish, and you're watching thinking, "What the hell are they on about?" Because it's from our point of view, it's complete nonsense. They believe it, but just from a distance, it's like, what are you on about? This is stupid. But they're really a massive belief in their kind of little fantasy world of what they are doing. Did you see the documentary reference style?
No, I haven't seen that. So
It's a really good one. It's all about just learning the idea of was she a true believer, or was she just opportunistic, or was she just mad? And it comes down to the idea that she wasn't fully into the Nazis all the time, but her weird kinks as a director tied to what the other weird kinks were as kind of party. So ultimately, they were like a match made in hell. And it's sort of the same as something like Potemkin or with the Russian communism thing, where he's the perfect person for this time because his techniques really push forward what they're trying to push forward. There's like a weird link between the artist and the political party that they're trying to promote. You know, because in Birth of the Nation, you really had a guy who's a very good technical director doing a film that was really stupid and really hateful. And you never seem to notice that. And it's like you need that kind of weird blind spot in director who's also very clever in how they make the film. Because if the films were rubbish, no one would watch them. No one would care about them. They wouldn't be hits because they have to be good to actually get attention.
Yeah, it's really weird how all of these people are like true authors, and they are like complete like revolutionaries in terms of like filmmaking, and they could have been like among the best directors of all time if they did something else than just commit to the hate and propaganda.
Yeah. I just don't think they looked into what they were doing. I mean, you can understand Eisenstein, he's in the middle of a Russian revolution. There's no way you'll be able to say to Stalin, "No, I'm not doing that. Can we do something a bit more critical of you?" You'd be shot. It's like Eisenstein, you can think, okay, maybe he's kind of. I don't think he get away with that. But for a nation, there's no excuse for. I mean, he was living within a democracy. He could say no to that quite easily. And Triumph of the Will, that was just pretty much she wanted to make that film as well. So I think it depends on who it is, but the first half of the 20th century, there's a lot of like fascist states who had artists making films for them. I've got this list of these top 10 Nazi propaganda films. I mean, Triumph of the Will was in it, of course, but there's also Judge Seuss, which is all about anti-Semitism. There was Homecoming, which was about a fictional film to show why they should attack Poland. There was a Hitler Youth one. There was try to find the Eternal Jew from Goebbels, and just generally a lot of like really hateful films. And if you watch Hitler's Hollywood, you see all these films they were making during the same time as like the war, to try and tell the German people they were doing well. And they were all kind of nonsense films that were trying to be Hollywood. They were just like these nonsense like melodramas, very much in the realm of like Birth of a Nation, really of they were really hateful, but they were trying to say all these people, we're the good people, and everyone else have tried to attack us as the bad people. And it's like that's kind of weird thing of this kind of weird mix of melodrama and identifying with people who are in your side as the good people that just kind of run through all these kind of fascist regimes. You know, they'll always try to tell them we're the good people, we're the best. Because you can't really tell the people, yeah, we're the villains. Sorry. You know, that would be a difficult conversation.
Yeah, I really need to watch some of the other fascist films of this era, because I've only seen Triumph of the Will, but I think it's very important to watch these types of films to understand the history, so that we wouldn't repeat it, even though we always repeat the history. But
yeah, we always do. We're a stupid species.
And there are so many kind of slight fascist tendencies in like current governments as well. Obviously not to this extent, but some small ones.
Yeah, but with more corrections now made to governments, they can't get away with as much anymore but we can still, they're still like, they're still there. I mean, we've got like propaganda films in World War II of every side, because every side made them. I mean, you had the Japanese made them for the other side. The Americans, with like Sands of Iwo Jima, made them in the Air Force. I mean, some of the American ones were actually really good films. You had the British made a few of them, like one of the aircraft is missing, which means Ronan just covered. They're all making the propaganda films. Our side is right. Our side is the best. But they were all, you know. But I mean, we only really see one set of them now, which is the one inside, because no one's going to watch the Japanese versions of these films or the German ones, because they're all kind of going to be pretty creepy, you know.
Yeah.
But we've still got American ones. We've still got some of those old American ones still turn up, you know, if you look for them. And we did 2 decades worth of World War II movies after the war ended from America that were always telling us how great the Americans were and how they won the war. You know.
Yeah.
Europe didn't do anything. It's just us. You know. Yeah. So that was the kind of basic, like, older films that were propaganda. Do you have any other ones that you might bring up from that era?
Not from that era, but I guess we could talk about I Am Cuba.
Oh yes,
that comes a bit after, so from the 60s.
Yeah, I Am Cuba was the one I was going to next anyway, but I'll let you introduce it since you're the one who suggested I watch it, which I watched it during the weekend.
Yeah, so this is a film by Mikhail Kalatozov. I think it got Russian money to make it. Again, it's from the 60s, so it's in the middle of the Cold War, and this is pro-Castro propaganda. But again, like these other films, it has very immaculate cinematography, and it's kind of like a new wave film in that sense, because it uses so many different techniques and so many different styles in one film. And I think it's divided into 6 vignettes, and it kind of, in the beginning, it shows kind of what led to the revolution, and then it shows the people marching in the streets and everything.
I would
really
say
good film, yeah.
I Am Cuba and Battleship Potemkin are the two best of these films. The two ones are probably easier to watch than the other ones. I would say they're the best ones, really. Potemkin and Cuba.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to be as mad for these two. I mean, I Am Cuba is a very naive film, but it's a very beautiful film. Like, I watched it on my projector, and I really enjoyed the visual signs of it all, because they're doing a lot of stuff that they've been trying to kind of do variations of for years. Like, Scorsese loves this film, and you can see how it influenced him with just some of the camera moves, and like the kind of full Steadicam thing before Steadicam, they're doing all these weird rigs and floating camera a lot of the time. There's some wonderful stuff in it, but it's really naive dramatically. I mean, it shares that same sense of purity for the characters that the other films have. Well, they're all kind of one-dimensional characters at best.
Yeah. I would love to see this film on Blu-ray, by the way, because I don't think it has a release. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's on YouTube, and you can actually get 1080p on YouTube, because that was the one I watched.
Yeah.
So you can see it in good quality, because the version I watched was very good quality. It looked beautiful. I mean, there's some great stuff. There's a great scene with fire burning the sugarcane field, and that's just beautiful. And there's the revolution stuff when the students are revolting against the army. There's great stuff. There's really great shots in there. It's just that you're kind of waiting for something that's not just does one-sided. And it's a film that didn't do that well in release, because the Russians thought it was too nice to the West at the early part. They didn't think it was brutal enough. And the Cubans, when they saw it, didn't like it, because they thought that it made them look, not as complex as they really are. So it kind of got caught, and it didn't really serve either master. But it is a beautiful film, but it it was like a kind of failed propaganda film because it didn't please the propagandists very much. Which,
Yeah, now, like 60 years after making that film, we know that the Cuban ideology hasn't been that successful. So I think the
yeah,
propaganda is going quite wrong as always with these films. So.
yeah, but it is a beautiful film. That's the weird thing. But it is a very frustrating film because it is an anthology. But each story is almost like it's a short story, but a really, really short story. So you only really get, you don't have that much drama even for like the half hour each story has. A lot of time you're like, this is kind of padded out. But yeah, you just know something's missing. There's a lot of stuff that's missing there. So whenever you get to any scene, you wish to spend longer on each area and actually be complicated. There's a whole bit about the people who are in kind of wastelands of having no money. It's like, Buñuel would have shot a full film there and been brilliant. Instead, you get like 5 minutes about some woman tearing up over her lost cross, and it's like, huh? The stuff like that is just very annoying. And there's some great scenes with the when the army's actually there, but you're stuck with a point of view character who's a complete moron. This guy who's in this jumper, who's just very annoying throughout the film. It's like, come on. So it's very annoying because it could have been a good film, but it's a propaganda film instead. But it is beautiful.
Yeah, but I don't think this doesn't like hit you in the head as much as something like some of the Eisenstein films or Bird of a Nation still. Like,
No,
I
it
think this
doesn't.
can still be enjoyed more.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go into it knowing that it's a propaganda film, but it's not like the most horrendous one around there. I mean, it's a naive one. It's probably the one that's probably its heart in its best place, really, because it's trying to show like these people are taking back the country from these like capitalists. You can get behind that a little bit. They're trying to take the country back. It's just that you know where it's leading after it though, which is the Castro thing, and he's going to have all the money. And they try to portray Castro as a really good guy at the end of it, and it's like, no, I don't think that's the truth. And yeah, and we're Shay in this film. He's nowhere to be seen. I think they were making it at that point. He'd already quit. So it is interesting, but it is almost like a fairy tale of Cuba rather than the reality of Cuba. You just feel like you're missing stuff. And again, when I was a student, we used to get all these Cuban films. Just an example of a different culture, and they were the most boring films ever because they had no sense of humor. They were just really, really dry and to the point. And it's like, come on, crack a smile, please. With a couple of good jokes, because communists are not funny in the main. Communist like films, until we get further on, weren't funny.
I would still recommend this film to people, and also the director, I think, is great. He made 2 films that are on Criterion Collection called Letter Never Sent and Cranes Are Flying, so I would recommend those 2 films too.
Yeah, it's obviously made by a really good director. I mean, that's the thing, is the guy's done a lot of good stuff, and it was just like, he was sent to me a propaganda film, and he was too much of an artist to really please his masters. I think that's kind of the problem. Do you know what I mean? I think they expected more, and he was too much like, I'm kind of interested. But it's also the fact is he'd all this equipment that we'd probably never get usually, and he was really showing off a lot of the time, and he was really doing some wonderful visual things that but it just had that same kind of propaganda thing of, I wish we're going further here, and I mean that's the thing. Something like Battleship Potemkin in October. These are great subjects for a really complicated film, but you're never going to get it because it's always going to be propagandist to the Russian point of view, or simplistic. It's never really going to be the kind of complex story you really want from it. Which is
I would love to see like an anti-communism version of these as well, so to get both of the views. But I
Yeah.
guess we need to read the books for that because there aren't really any films for that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the Russian Revolution. Is like you don't talk about. I mean, where are all the films about Lenin or Stalin that are actually really dark and really critical, and that would actually be a good history lesson to people about why you don't do this. That would take bravery, which no one really seems to have. They'd rather just do this kind of those hack jobs of they were great, they were monsters, that was it, rather than they were complicated and they were monsters, but for a reason. I mean, look at Hitler stuff. I mean, there's so many films about Hitler and so few of them treat him as a human being who did all this horrible stuff.
Yeah, I really want to read Gulag Archipelago. So that's the book about the horrors of communism and Stalin.
Yeah, I've got that one. That one. It's so intimidating to look at. It's 1,000 pages of this. So I need to read it, but oh god, when to start?
Yeah. There's the new abridged version, which is kind of shorter. But
Yeah,
if you want to read the whole thing, there's 3 huge volumes or something.
I know. It's like I can get the bridge version. And it's like I know I need to start it, but it's always so intimidating. It's like because I did this whole season of Holocaust movies a few years ago. It's put me off going to that one now because it's like I remember how traumatizing that was. It was like I went way too far into that.
I don't even own the book yet, so I need to buy it.
Yeah, no. See, when you're into the Holocaust movies and you're the 4 films in, you start to think, have I made a mistake when there's another 6 films to watch? It's usually that's when you're thinking, I may have not thought this through. This is a bit depressing. Yeah. So I was thinking, you've got the next era that really is the Czech films of the new wave Czech films from the 60s these weren't going against propaganda films. They weren't propaganda films. These were reacting to propaganda of the Russian state that basically took over everything in the East, really. And there's a lot of directors who were not really fans of communism. They weren't really big on communism, and they weren't really big in Russia actually taking over countries like Poland and all the rest of it. But you got the Czech New Wave, so you had stuff like The Fireman's Ball, Parting Against, The Cremator, Diamonds and Night, Close to Watch Trains are the ones I've noted down, of films that were to have a subversive note to them, and also you'd get animated films the same way, where there would be slight allusions to something that were going against propagandists, and a lot of these directors would get to make 1 or 2 films, then they were banned from making films again because they were obviously mocking the state. So have you seen many of these films?
Yeah, I've seen some of them, and I would add the film Daisies as well, because that's a kind of a example of kind of hardcore individualism as well. And I think that the Czech filmmakers were way more liberal and again individualistic because they knew how awful it is to live under communism. And again, if we come to the modern day, you still see that these countries that used to be under communism, they are the people from those countries are the ones that are critical of communism. But then we go into Britain and the US, and there are lots of young supporters of communism because they never lived under it. So
yeah, because I mean, you look at Poland now, they won't, even though they're in the EU, they will not listen to the EU very often. They will rebel against them at every opportunity because they do not like collective votes or anything. They just do not like that. They're just, because of Russia, they just do not want to deal with that all the time. It's created this kind of thing within Europe as that's not a good idea. That's just not, let everyone be who they are and don't do this. I mean, the one that I really liked was Parting the Guests. That was one that really, because that was it freaked out the Russians when they saw it because they thought it was just a silly little film, and then it was like, oh, they've been critical of us. Oh, there's a whole lot of stories like that. The Cremator is a great film. there's a whole bunch of them. There's a whole sense of if you do the propaganda films, you're going to have people rebelling against it in subtle ways. They're just not going to like it. You look at Germany in the 70s as well. They were doing a lot of like films that were very kind of individual directors like Herzog, Fassbinder, people who would never fit into like the 40s German cinema at all. We could never. They just weren't that. They were just very different. So I mean, a lot of propaganda films create in their wake these highly individualistic directors who are appalled by what their earlier generation did.
Yeah, and I would mention also the Italian neorealist movement.
Yes.
I think some of those films could be seen as actually propaganda, as left-wing propaganda, because I think they also have that very simplified way of talking about the different classes. So they always kind of victimize the poorer people, and then they make the rich people evil, and it's just again very simplified. But again, I enjoy those films still, but that's just something I've noticed when I've watched them. So.
Yeah, because in a lot of Italian films, you've got the South Italian films and North Italian films. The South Italian films are all about the countryside, and for a certain audience, and in the North, it's a different audience. And some of the Italian film that became really important in the 70s, 60s, 70s, when all the politics happened, because there was kind of a subtle civil war between different parts of Italy, just in the wake of what happened in Italy in the 30s and 40s, and just all the political fall through, really. Because in the 50s, you got the neo-realists, the 40s and 50s, neo-realists. Then in the 60s, you got the existentialists, like Antonioni, and, my brain's just gone completely blank there.
Well, there was Fellini and
Pasolini, yeah. And just another thing, what's the name? It's Pasolini, we said. It was like, yeah, but there's a whole bunch of them. The Italians in the 60s, there was Bertolucci. They're all fascinated by fascism. And like the people who would make the films that are the propaganda films, the people who would believe in propaganda like that, became almost the subject of a lot of European films post-war, really. It was just that sense of the effects of propaganda actually made a lot of people become much more critical of the kind of imagery you're seeing and how you're going to take it in. Again, as you pointed out, the lefties, they come up after the war and said everything that's not ours is, right-wing mania. Anything that's not working class is right-wing. And it's like, no, it's not. But that's something that continues to this day, really. Which is kind
I think it's pretty hard to find directors who kind of criticize both the right wing and left wing, kind of far sides of both of the spectrums. But usually the directors they can be like Marxist, and then they criticize the fascist side, but they can't criticize their own side at all.
Yeah, I know, but it just continues that way. It just becomes a set of tribes. I mean, everyone knows that the far right's really dodgy, but no one's really allowed to say the far left's really dodgy too. Like, it's almost like something you're not allowed to say. But everyone kind of knows. I don't know anybody who really trust communism, like anyone, because I come from working class area. There's no one who'd ever really believe it. Everyone's a communist. They would like, what's the matter with you? Because everyone knows what happened in Russia. It's just like a certain kind of spoiled middle class type of person who would do that. But
I had one teacher in university who was a complete Marxist. Like, he even positively talked about the Soviet Union, because apparently it was a good place to live just because the people had homes, and they could take a short trip to some lake in the summer. So that made the Soviet Union like a great country to live in and stuff like that. So it's just awful.
Yeah, it's a lot of people who are like spoiled rotten are the ones who see that kind of stuff, and it's like, no, that's not really the way people want to live. But yeah, it is a kind of weird thing. It has become its own like a propaganda thing of for a society. This is the ideal way we should live. Is based upon your dream of some other society and what they promoted as their ideal way to live. So yes, I mean, a lot of people who talk about communism, I'm not really talking about real communism, I'm talking about what they think communism was. And it's not the reality. It's not all those gulags and all that death. I mean, a lot of them would actually just say, oh, that was overstated and things. And it's like, no, it was not. It really was not.
Or many of them say that wasn't real communism and stuff like that.
I know. It wasn't real communism, yeah. Yeah, I think it was. It's like
they say that it's like a state fascism or something like that.
Yeah, I know, because I mean, for someone like me who is genuinely left leaning, communism is an embarrassment. It's like it's a thing. Don't go there. That's the worst possible direction to go in. It's like why are you embarrassed everyone by bringing this up? Because it's obviously been proven to be utterly wrong. It's not the way to go forward, and it's like it becomes this thing of. It's like it's a problem, really. It's like because people are still think, "Oh, communism can work." It's like it really can't. It's never going to work. It's impossible. The way people are hardwired, this is not going to work because people are tribal and everything's always going to be manipulated. But you get lefty movies with this propaganda, as you pointed out. I mean, the ones that jump out to me are like something like Ken Loach and Michael Moore, who are lefty filmmakers, but a lot of the time it does feel like propagandist, really, because there's no like. I mean, I'm not saying every film they make is horrible. I mean, like Ken Loach made some good films, but but to me, his films become very one note, and if his films were more nuanced, should actually they'd be more powerful, really. But it becomes just as one note thing for me, at least.
Yeah, I've only seen Kes, so I can't really comment that much about Ken Loach, but Kes is a good film, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good director, but he makes films that are kind of one note, very working class. It's almost like the working class experience is the only valid experience you've got, rather than, but there's lots of valid experiences you have to actually think it through and see who or like what's the good and bad in this kind of mindset, rather than it's only us versus them, and it's like that is kind of propagandist to a degree, because you're ignoring the reality of other people who you may not agree with entirely.
Yeah, we really need the kind of center-left, liberal, humanist people back, and not just these socialist left.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am at. But it's like you do feel a bit weirded out. But the thing is, that happens in waves. Like sometimes these kind of extremes happen, probably because of Trump, really. And he brought all the extremes out, and everyone's listening to the extremists now. Biden's in, so hopefully they'll calm down a bit. But yeah, some of them are nuts. But there's so many people on the right who are complete lunatics as well. It's like you're watching both sides. It's like, can't we just talk to the kind of sane people who are around the centre? You be centre left, centre right, but you're not a complete lunatic and don't take offence at everything. Can we just talk to these people and try and make sense of stuff?
Yeah, the religious right can be really toxic as well, and they kind of have also the similar kind of victim culture as the far left have. Even though the right wing or the religious right always they criticize the left about the victim culture, but they also victimize themselves at the same time. So.
I know. I mean, it's like both sides can be completely absurd, and if you criticize one side, it's like, oh, you're from the other side. And like, no, not really. I can see the absurdity of your situation because I've basic observation, you know. So have you actually watched any Michael Moore films?
No, I was thinking of watching Bowling for Concubine, but then I didn't watch it. I just didn't have the energy for it.
Yeah, they're kind of they're very annoying, right? Because it points out a lot of hypocrisy in the right, which should be a good thing. But he goes so far with it and he jumps to conclusions rather than actually having a very balanced view. It becomes a kind of how can I sell this film? I have to make it much more, outrageous to make my point, and I have to kind of fudge facts. And it's like you're not helping anybody doing that. You really aren't. So it becomes very annoying. It's very after a while you think I've had enough of your stuff because it's. I mean, I was because politically I'm to the left. I didn't watch some of his films because they did relate to some of my beliefs, but it became really annoying pretty quick, and you realise he's fudging stuff in a way that I just didn't think was very healthy, because if you're making everyone who doesn't believe in you the way you believe as being the other and being demonic, it's just not very helpful. And that's kind of propagandist to me. Just like if you're making anyone who doesn't believe the same thing as you are as the villain, it's like, nah, that's not good for society.
Yeah, I think some of the Michael Moore films probably aren't that relevant for us Europeans. So again, obviously that Bowling for Concubine is about the gun debate, and we don't really have that in Europe like they have in the US. But
yeah, we still have certain things, but it's very American based, but it just becomes very annoying to watch because it's like he becomes almost like one of the public faces for left wingism, and it's like, well, he's not really. He's kind of he's just like an outlier who kind of sells himself on the idea of he's a lefty, entertainer, and it's like, again, it's something I don't think is a very good thing to, idolize. For the bottom using.
But I think I heard many people kind of criticize his latest documentary about climate change.
Yeah, I think people are getting sick of him now. I think everyone's kind of like, okay, we've seen your tricks. It's, because I think anyone on the left or the right, if you start to do things that are dishonest, you can get away with it for so long, but eventually your own sides are going to get sick of you after a while because you're making them look stupid. And the people start to get fed up because you're not a good example to anybody, which is something that's you just have to be very careful of. Now, I also looked. There's other examples of going against the propagandist of your time. There's Paths of Glory, which is a fiction film, but it's actually looking at propaganda, the military propaganda that they present as the reasons for doing things. And they're saying this is crazy, which is a very Kubrick thing, because he also did that with Dr. Strangelove, and he's showing like the nuclear defense strategy was crazy. So you've got that kind of thing of it, like going against the natural propaganda, really. I think that's going to healthy thing to do. Even if you're not actually being a propaganda film or anti-propaganda film, you're just being intelligent and actually looking through it all and saying this is nuts.
Yeah, Paths of Glory is really, anti-military and anti-government in many ways. It shows the kind of hypocrisy and the evil in the top ranks of the military, and then it again shows how kind of the soldiers are the real victims in war. And yeah,
but it doesn't show the soldiers have been perfect either. It shows you they're annoying, but they're still human, and they don't deserve what they get, really.
Yeah, there's the kind of moral gray area with the soldiers. Some of them are kind of cowardly and not like perfect human beings, but you still kind of root for them before they're getting executed. So.
Yeah, and Dr. Strangelove, you just see them, all of these leaders as totally insane, utter gargoyles, in a way that people hated. I mean, people were actually calling Kubrick a traitor to America when Dr. Strangelove was released because it was so mocking of their leadership. It was like, so it's so anti-propaganda that, he was actually accused of being a traitor, which shows he's successful.
Yeah, the government officials are really like that. Like they ruin everything, and all the wars are. Some people say that a war is kind of due to humanity, but you can just see that a war is due to this very small part of humanity. These politicians that take us to war and ruin our lives, and
and it's a society around that always kind of supports that kind of decision making because it's a custom. We're kind of getting out of that now in certain countries, saying this is not a good idea. But a lot of countries still have that kind of thing within their society as you respect the leaders and things like that. And,
I think the Switzerland model is pretty good. So they have direct democracy. So they vote on every kind of big issue. So the politicians don't have that much power.
Yeah, so you basically stop them from going crazy.
Yeah, but even that isn't perfect. Like I would go for further than that, but anyway.
Yeah. There's other examples I've got that go against it, as well as the Czech New Wave and could be. There's also the Richard Lester ones, like How I Won the War in the Bed Sitting Room, which take the mickey out of the society structures around the war and around nuclear arms and how crazy it is and how just the idea of how people support the status quo even though it's killing them because they're so class conscious and they don't want to jump out and say, no, I don't want to do this. Because a lot of times propaganda films come from the institutions have been kept going for years and years, well beyond their logical use, and people just can't break out of the societal roles, really, which used to be a big problem in Britain, where people all had a class system and that was it. And you still get that in a lot of countries and around the world. If people know a class and that's all they can really see themselves as. So there's things like that as well that can go against propaganda films. But that's kind of a minor side note, really. I only thought of it this morning, so I thought I'd just mention it.
Yeah. I think we could maybe mention kind of Mike Lee as the better version of Ken Loach. I think you have the kind of social commentary there, but it isn't the main focus. He focuses on the human beings and making them very real and relatable.
I intentionally kept Mike Lee out of it so that I wouldn't mention him, so it wouldn't be suggesting I'm saying he was propagandist, because I don't think he is. I think he is much more humanistic. I bring up Ken Loach because I've seen some films with him that is like, I'm thinking this is strong, but it's also nonsense in some places. There's some things that are like, no, he's done some really good stuff. He's also done stuff that's just way off. So I brought him up because I think his politics is in the way of his sense. Sometimes, he's died.
I have avoided his films a lot. So, like, I think the I, Daniel Blake, I haven't seen that one, but that sounds like a left-wing propaganda a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, because I'm a lefty and I find his films to be dry and very propagandist, it's a kind of a sign that he's probably more lefty than me.
Yeah, I think he's pretty far to the left. Like, maybe not
much.
A communist, but at least a socialist.
Yeah.
Like Corbyn level.
Well, who? Like Corbyn?
But Jeremy Corbyn, yeah.
Oh, let's
not talk about him.
He was a lunatic. Yeah. I was not voting Labour when he was in power. So there's just no way I would vote Labour when he was in power. All right, I've got Christian movies propagandist, like the new ones like Unplanned and God's Not Dead. I've not watched these films. I just know the propagandist towards our kind of whiny Christian point of view of we've been victimized in our own country. No one believes us anymore. No one listens to us. And
they shouldn't believe that.
Yeah, and if you're an atheist, you're a scumbag and you ought to die. So,
Even
I just thought I'd bring it up. What's that?
Even though they are the ones that are like pedophiles and they tell their kids that they should burn in hell and stuff like that. So I think they are the ones that often are evil, even though many of them are obviously good people too. Yeah,
no, I think it's just a case of some people making these ones are a bit crazy. I mean, It's just that the kind of movies made by people you're thinking, I don't know any Christians like this. Most Christians I know are fairly fine and sane, but this just makes them look crazy. You know.
Yeah, I mean, the American Christians are a bit different from the European ones. The European ones are more moderate and more secular. And
yeah, they just live and let live. Yeah, I mean, even like American Christians, I'm pretty sure most of them I look at that and go, what? You know.
yeah, they have the Mormons and
Yeah.
the evangelists and
Yeah. I think it's a certain more of a minority that make these kind of films, but it is a kind of genre and it is a kind of propaganda for something that's never going to happen because everyone just looks at it and are embarrassed by the whole thing. So, but it is happening. It is a kind of something to be aware of. Now, I've got notes about typical mainstream bullshit, I call it.
Yeah.
As propaganda.
Yeah, I have one film here too. So,
what's your film then? I'll let you start.
Saving Private Ryan.
I had Black Hawk Down.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one, but I know that it's probably propaganda.
Yeah, okay, let's hear Saving Private Ryan. There you go.
No, well, it's typical pro-military, pro-America stuff. Like you see the American flags waving in the end, and the main character Matt Damon, as he's old, like he's just crying on the graveyard and stuff. But and it also makes the Germans like faceless monsters, and it only shows the American soldiers as the heroes and victims, and also it shows the military in a very positive light, like how they would go to save just one individual, even though they would never do that. And would that even be the right thing to do if we look at it from the consequentialist kind of ethical standpoint, that they are going to sacrifice many soldiers just to save one? So would that even be justifiable? But the military would never do that. So
yeah, it's a sentimental kind of political decision, I think. I think they did something like that once in World War II. But it's just a sentimental PR thing. It's not something the military would do all the time. But I know what you mean. That film is very annoying. It's really
yeah, I
annoying.
truly despise it. It's one of my least favorite films of all time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know what you mean by that one. I do get annoyed with Saving Private Ryan. But it's well made, but it's so much of it is really annoyingly dumb and yeah. Plus, you get to Matt Damon and you don't like him very much, and it's like, why did you come and save this guy? Come on. And yeah, it's just a lot of the film's stupidities aren't commented on, really. And it just is a really bizarre film. So yeah, I wouldn't class something as propaganda, but I would say it's very pro-American, but I think it depends on your point of view. That one, I think it's kind of some people would see it's propaganda for American, other people wouldn't. But I would definitely class it as very annoying. I did Black Hawk Down because it takes place in Africa, and there was a civil war going on at the time. The Americans jumped in on, and this is the story of Americans, poor Americans stuck in the middle of this war, the civil war, and you're like, there's literally every other story around this situation is more interesting than the story you told. And you did this whiny story about these Americans being killed, and it's like, who cares? Really, who cares? And it's so right wing militaristic towards how wonderful the troops are and all the rest of it. And it's like, who cares? Just really, who's nobody? You it wasn't your territory. You went in anyway and did something stupid and get a lot of people killed, you know. So that was basically it should have been a film about the whole situation, not just that one element of it, which thing annoys me because that's like I call propaganda. It's like ignoring everything else around it. There's also some other ones that are kind of similar to Top Gun, pro America to the extreme. You've got the Rambo and Rocky movies from the 80s, very much propaganda for the right wing American. You know, especially Rambo with some of the, how many Russians did they kill in those movies? You've got Green Berets, the John Wayne film from the 60s, how America should win Vietnam with 60-year-old men like John Wayne. It's very propagandist. There's stuff like Michael Bay films like Armageddon that are very, very pro-American, even though they're trying to deal with the end of the world. It's still so pro-American and really stupid that way, and it's like, oh, God, that's so embarrassing. So there's stuff like that kind of got on my nerves, really. They're very propagandist, you know. But there's also a film, Red Dawn, which actually takes that idea and takes the mickey out of it a little bit, because it's John Millie's film about the Russians invading America and the kids fighting back. You seen Red Dawn? Like
I've only seen the remake with Chris Hemsworth.
That's bloody awful. See, the original's good. The original, it takes that idea that could be really stupid. It's one of those things where the remake is the film you would dread the first one would be.
Yeah.
You know, and the original was actually much more about these kids having to learn how to fight. And it's actually criticizing the lazy American teenager of the 80s and how lazy they are and how entitled they are. And Millie's just putting them into the middle of the forest and having them all trying to have to survive in the forest by themselves and having to fight Russians and things. And it's a much darker film about how useless this whole war is and how deranged it is. And it's pretty dark. So it's what should be a propaganda film, and what was criticized by propaganda film is actually about the absurdity of the whole thing and how crappy the thing is. And even some of the Russians turned out to be quite decent. It's a war they've been sent to fight. So that was kind of something that subverted what you think of would be a typical propaganda, dumb as hell movie, like Invasion USA or something, where it takes the idea of what you would think would be a propaganda film and then just subverts it. But Top Gun's bloody awful.
Yeah, it's really hard to get through. I had to have like 2 days to go through the whole film, even though it's like below 2 hours. I think.
Yeah, it's
there's the sequel coming, I think, or did it already come out? I don't know.
It's out like, is it Christmas? It's out. I can't remember. It's coming out. There've been so many trailers for it because it keeps on getting delayed because of the COVID. So do you have any other propaganda stuff that we've missed?
Not really, at least stuff that people would know, but I just wrote down one Finnish one, but people won't notice, but this is a really famous Finnish film called 8 Deadly Shots. So this was a state-funded propaganda against alcoholism. So alcoholism has always been a huge problem in Finland. So the state funded a film that showed based on a true story event of, I think, a man. Did he kill his family or something due to being in the influence of alcohol? So that was kind of a state propaganda film in Finland. So I thought that would be worth mentioning because it's a huge classic in Finland. But
yeah, we've Scotland. We've alcohol problems as well, but they don't even. We just use fictional films. They don't really state finance anything that much. Maybe they'll put the money in a little bit, but not really that much to the budget. I mean, the only other films I really thought of, well, just like films that commented on propaganda films like Starship Troopers, you know, that was kind of a Mickey take of your typical propaganda film, and it had all these kind of Lenny Riefenstahl references and just showing you how it's doing this simple story of a kid going into the army and learn how to fight, but it's taking a Mickey because basically you're on the side of the Nazis, you know, and it's really a Mickey take of America and its fascist tendencies. So there's stuff like that, and there's also some of the privilege of the war games, which takes the kind of propagandist, like news media thing of a pop star, of how to promote these guys are a pop star to make a lot of money, but also to use pop stars as a way of social control. Or the war games, she takes you the idea of the documentary and something, but that's to make it about nuclear holocaust and actually make it honest, which is really something which also got it banned. But it's going to kind of take off on propaganda films and actually turn them in their head, really. So 2 of them are Peter Watkins films, one's Paul Verhoeven. So those are kind of more kind of satirical directors in the first place. But those are kind of 3 films I thought were good like, anti-propaganda films.
Yeah, I think Punishment Park is also a kind of good example of having a kind of more nuanced view politically.
Yeah, I didn't want to just make it the Peter Watkins show. Yeah, Punishment Park's great. Yeah, but that's the thing, is everyone now knows propagandist techniques. It's very hard to shock people anymore with them. But people still fall for them. I think a lot of time it's because you can still hide them in narrative a lot of time and just make your lead character so likable you don't think of it as the politics involved. I think that's a way they always get around it, you know, just through fiction. Like, what's acceptable in a society comes through their fiction, and it's a good way to control people, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I was bringing it up earlier on about how the Buffer Nation, a lot was a narrative-based idea of your lead character is always likable. And it's something we've never got beyond, is like your lead character has to be likable rather than make him complicated. A complicated lead character actually includes you to have a world that's interesting. So if you always stick to like a simplistic set of characters, the world you're painting will always be kind of simplistic and open to be used for propaganda of some sort, for whatever way your state wants it to be. You know. Well, that's my opinion anyway.
Yeah, it's always about demonizing the other side, and then I think the war genre is the genre where we see the propaganda the most, but also we have lots of great examples of kind of political war films that still have that kind of objective and nuanced view. So like The Human Condition, for example, is a great example of a film that is both critical about both kind of more communist and fascist leaning ideologies, and it seems to take this kind of more center kind of humanist viewpoint about everything. So
yeah, because it starts off as a criticism of imperialist Japan, and then it becomes a criticism of communist Russia and communist China, and it just none of this stuff works like at all. Everything's so corrupted and so difficult. And you look at Harry Carey, it's about the politics of the samurai, and the samurai usually is idealized as something perfect. And this one says, no, they were very human and they were very messed up, and this
hypocritical.
Yeah, just all this stuff. So these kind of stories that you don't get very often because people like the simple narrative, and the simple narrative doesn't get you the nuance that's really important to have when looking at any society. You're just getting simple narratives, you're just getting a simple thing or simple view of what that society wants to project itself as, you know. I mean, we look at, remember the sort of Fritz Lang made Testament of Dr. Abuse, and it freaked out the Nazis because there's a madman in an asylum running the crime world, and he thought that was a metaphor for Nazism because it was a perfect metaphor for Nazism, you know, and they freaked out and had to leave the country. It was like, so if you have a simplistic thing instead of imagery, it can be tweaked quite easily and can, but it just makes it so easy for people to manipulate. I mean, if you look at what we've got now with the COVID stuff, no one's allowed to criticize anything because you're being dangerous. You know, it's taken us a year to basically come up with to actually admit that maybe potentially it came from the Wuhan lab, and it's like, what kind of society takes a year to work that out when it's so obviously there? That's where it came from in the first place.
Yeah,
it's called the Wuhan lab. When it was all making those kind of things, it's like, it took like a year to do that. It's like, how is that possible? Because everything's propaganda towards don't tell people that, and it's like, come on, everyone's got common sense, so it's something we keep on seeing year after year, and it's something everyone's been talking about privately, but no one's allowed to say publicly. So we're always get propaganda, even if we think we're above it. There's always someone lying, which allows us to be really conspiracy theory as well.
Yeah, there's so much COVID propaganda out there.
I
Like the
know.
media makes it seem like it's like a worse than cancer, basically, that it will kill everyone, even though the survival rate is close to 100. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people die with it, but there's a lot more people are fine. But and I understand it because you're paranoid. But I get the fear that runs through a society when this thing happens. I understand all of that and why people don't want to go out to places. Because I'm like that. I don't like going out to places generally. But it's also the thing is we can't talk about it as grown-ups. Anybody who does a point of view that's slightly critical, suddenly they try to kill people, and it's like, no, it's not really the case. They've just another point of view. In our healthy society that's very much centrist and allows both sides to talk, it should be something you actually can create a kind of common sense approach to actually have a solution, rather than having a lot of fear about discussing it in any possible way. You know, because I mean everybody's wrong with stuff, and if you just have this thing of you can't say anything, you're not going to get the answers you need, really.
Yeah, I think everyone should always be questioning their own beliefs and always be ready to change their mind, because no one is always right, like you said. And like I've changed my mind on big issues also in the last few years. So I think that's a very healthy approach.
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing people have to admit themselves is sometimes you're stupid about something. You know, sometimes you're really stupid about some subject. It's fine. We're all stupid about something. There's so many things we don't know that much about. Like, and sometimes you've just got obvious kind of common sense things, and you know, people aren't allowed to say things. I think that's one of the reasons why I would do propaganda films, because even though you have historical propaganda films, even now everything just seems very much like who's saying it and why they're saying it, and rather than just saying, well, just look at the information, what the information is. Does it scientifically make sense, or does it logically make sense? You know, rather than are they part of my tribe or something? And it's like, because so much in the last year or two has been, are you on my side? If so, I'll listen to you, and if not, I won't. And it's like, that is like a 3-year-old talking. That's just so stupid. You know.
Should we move into the woke stuff?
What?
Should we move on to the woke ideology propaganda,
All right.
because we haven't talked about that yet.
All right. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. I'll let you do the woke things.
Yeah, so I think there aren't many like pure woke propaganda films, but we see that woke stuff more in the kind of backstage, in a way, that how they, for example, cast the people to these films. So you need to check all the representation boxes. So you need to have like a gay people in the cast. You need to have lots of women, black people, and it isn't anymore like a meritocratic process, but it's only about filling the quotas and making everybody happy.
Yeah, it's antithetical to art, because art should be specific about some subject, and you should be honest to that subject. It means like if you're doing that, you're actually going to have to do that for everything. So how can you do that if you're making a story about a minority subject? You actually have to have a white person in there as well for a boring part. Really, I just think you should be honest to the subject, and I don't like that quota thing. I just think you should just have like, okay, what tells you something in this world? Because I mean, I love watching Asian films. I love watching looking at films from different cultures where there's no white people all in there, and I don't care because I'm interested in the subject. I don't need to see someone like me in a film. I'm quite happy. As soon as you get to that subject and like, oh, we need quotas of this and this, it's like, why? It's just tell me the story, and I'll watch different stories of different people, and I'll be fine. So I find it kind of weird, really.
Yeah, I don't really get why, like, I couldn't relate to a black person, for example, if our lives were really similar in other ways? Like, why is the skin color making that relatability like worse? Like, I can still relate to a character in a whole black film if we just have the same struggles, for example, if we're both from a working class environment. And so why couldn't I relate to like a guy in a black film? Yeah, just because we have a different skin color. Like, it's just so stupid.
I mean, skin color is the dumbest thing ever, because skin color is just like how the sun affects your skin historically when your gene line, and it's nothing to do with you. It's just nothing literally to do with you. I mean, do you actually see your own skin most of the time? I mean, you see your arms. Really, that's about it during the day, and every time you look in the mirror, doesn't matter. And again, I also hate whenever you see a film with minorities and then suddenly you have a token white guy in it. It's just annoying. It's like, why is this person here? You know, and if you see a film with anybody, it just, why are you there? You know, it's like ridiculous. But also, I quite like people messing around with stuff as well, though. I mean, there was this whole thing about Anne Boleyn thing in the BBC last week, where they had a black actress playing her, and I was like, I don't care, it's fine. I mean, it's not historically accurate. I don't care, because it's fun to do something different way sometimes, just to see what the hell it looks like. I mean, doesn't bother me. I never watched the thing because I don't like BBC historical things, but it's like, but they were talking about it as if it's a big important thing. Like, it's not really. It's just they do this in theatre all the time. They just change it around a little bit and see how to look this way and how to look that way, and it's like, fine, just tell the story. You don't need to be going looking for a knighthood for casting someone of a different race than is normally told. You know, it's like I'm quite happy for them to change the color of somebody just to try it out and see how it's different. That's fine, but just have a reason why you're doing it, or adjust the narrative in an interesting way to give a different feel and different mood. Because you see that all the time. Like, someone does a gangster movie, so they'll change the makeup of the ethnic makeup of the gangsters, and it gives it a whole different flavor. Or someone does a love story, and you've got different background of where they come from, so it gives it different little nuances you don't expect. It's like, that's all great, but just be honest. And if they're going to interact with somebody from a different culture, make that interaction interesting. Like, nowadays you get this thing of like there's almost like this kind of stereotypical Asian character you get in American films, and you're like, and he's like, where did they come from then? Because Korea and China and Japan are very different countries. Actually, saying one similar to another is kind of racist. You know, the Chinese and Japanese hate each other. You know, they really, there's centuries of tension between them. It's like, but it's just a stereotypical Asian thing, and it's like, well, if you're going to do an Asian character, actually make it an Asian character who's interesting, and not just a white guy who's looks Asian. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said, and I would mention one thing that I think the Vogue stuff has really ruined, and it's comedy and humor. So I think it really has ruined humor, because we can't really make fun of any specific people or group, and we just have to make these very general type of jokes. And I think it can sometimes be, or it can sometimes make these new films really unfunny to me, and I don't laugh that much anymore. Yeah.
I think it's bouncing back though. I think people, I mean, the Chappelle Show thing, and there's been a couple of other ones now that I've kind of stopped back at it, and like, I think it was a case of it needed to be rebalanced a little bit, but it balanced so much the other side, I had to kind of pull it back a bit again. And I think it's sort of it's going in the kind of proper balanced direction. It's still going to be problems, but I think it's kind of like people get sick of the kind of woke thing, and now they want to come back to somewhere where you can acknowledge those differences, but be funny with it. So, I mean, I think the woke peak was about 2 years ago, to be honest, because I don't really talk about woke I don't think about woke as much anymore, because I think people kind of I've kind of had it with the kind of extremes of you must be this, there must be that. I think people are actually starting to get to the point of, oh, okay, we'll cast this person, but why? You know, and try and do something interesting with it. I think people are now kind of getting to the point of there was a problem, we had to sort it, and now what do we do with it? And I think that's more interesting area to be in, you know. So I like a lot of people still going on about woke a lot, and I'm kind of less concerned with it now because I think people have had enough of the kind of smug side of it now. It's like, okay, what do you do interesting with it now that you've kind of made a few adjustments, like maybe we can bring more people of minorities in. And I think people who are minorities are actually complaining, like, this is kind of boring because it's not really our culture. Can we do something interesting with it? I think that's quite interesting to do now. But I don't know if I think we're off topic here somewhere.
Yeah. But I think in the end, the woke people are just a small minority of people anyway, but they just have a lot of media presence, and that makes them seem more huge than they are.
Yeah, I think some of it was necessary, but I think some of it was the way it was done wasn't. But I think people, common sense is starting to kind of correct it in a way that's, which can almost happens in most societies anyway. Is like the extremists see there's a problem, and maybe there is a problem, and then it kind of filters through, and the most extreme part of it kind of gets chucked aside because it's like, that's annoying. Don't really deal with that anymore. And you can find the more common sense stuff. Because I mean, like, I think of the films I watch, and like they're not. I mean, half of them don't have white people in them at all. So I watch a lot of Asian films and things, and the country films all around the world. It's like half of them do not have white people, and I don't care. You know, like I said earlier, I don't like a token white character in anything because it's boring. You know, I don't like a token any kind of character. I just like characters who are. I like kind of weird mixes of characters and you interact but yeah, because woke was a problem though for a while, but I'm feeling it less now. I just feel that we were through the worst. You know, the same way as now with McCarthyism for a while, it was really bad, and then you get through the worst, and people said, "Oh God, we overreacted. We better kind of pull it back a bit." I think that's where we are now, but I could be completely wrong. As I said before, I'm wrong a lot.
Yeah, and I've still liked many of these films that could be said to be like all black or woke, like Moonlight. I liked, for example. I liked Us, Get Out. Like I like these films.
Yeah,
so
they're
it's
good
not
films.
like something that it would kind of ruin my enjoyment of them. But
yeah, I mean, I think the directors are know what they're going for, and they're doing it for a reason. They're making a film for a reason. You're going to enjoy it. Doesn't really matter. I mean, I'm actually happy if the direct. The thing I don't like about the quota thing, right, is basically it takes the power from the director to actually do the interesting thing. That's it. I just want to make sure the person making the film has an opportunity to make the most interesting film they've got. That's my only real concern. I don't care what the person looks like who's the main character as long as they're interesting.
and for the films that I just mentioned, I don't think they had the quota thing. They like Moonlight, for example. Obviously, it had to be black because it was about those kind of suburban, like Miami area. So that would be in reality also.
Yeah, it would be absurd to have that.
Have lots of white people there. Had that interracial thing, and that was like a big thing about the film. So obviously, it has to have that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Get Out is the white people had to be the villains because they were pointing out how stupid we can be about race sometimes, and that was funny because if they're white, you know that's true. White people can be really stupid about race sometimes. So what's the big deal? You know,
but then someone like Spike Lee takes it a bit too far, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I think we just. I think with propaganda, we just have to be careful just to step back and say, "Okay, this is stupid. Let's just have some common sense." I think that's the thing we've been getting on at a lot in this conversation is as we've been talking about propaganda, just pulling back to some sort of center and actually just have a common sense solution to something rather than a crazy communist thing or a crazy far right thing or something. It's just like it's none of that stuff works. You just have to try and have some sanity.
Yeah, individualism, reason, and common sense. Like those are the things that we should support.
I mean, that's the thing. You can have a sense of community because I'm lefty. Community is really important, but there's only so far it can go before it becomes oppressive. The same way individualism is important as long as for only so long, and eventually it becomes oppressive as well because you get fascism that way too. You just have to have a kind of common sense kind of this is as far as this side goes before it becomes a problem. This is how far this side goes before it becomes a problem. And just have a common sense attitude to it and just say, okay, this is no following this, otherwise you're going to do something really stupid. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and in the end, all the kind of radical ideologies are pretty much the same. Like communism and fascism, like they are very similar to each other, even though they are kind of the opposite sides as well.
Yeah, but the collective stuff, they're like we don't want to think about it. We want the imagery of perfection, that we are perfect, we are the best. Our ideology is the best way to do it. Which you see in Birth of a Nation, you see in the style film. It's like they love themselves. There's such vanity in these projects. Like the Birth of a Nation, the people of the South are in love with their ideology, and it's absurd. You're watching thinking this is so stupid. You know, this is just absurd what what they're thinking of themselves. And you watch any kind of nation that does propaganda, there's such pride in themselves that it becomes really embarrassing to watch. Because they're not very self-critical in a way that's healthy for people to be, I think.
Yeah. Now we should watch the remake of Bird of a Nation and see if it's any better.
Oh, that one. I heard of that one. I don't think I'll bother. I don't ever want to see Birth of a Nation ever again in my life. I've seen it once. To me, that's enough. That's all I ever need to ever do. I don't ever want to see that film again. I don't want to ever see.
Yeah, it's probably the same for me as well.
Yeah, I don't want to see the reference to that film again either. Once is enough. That's it. Any of the kind of propaganda films that we covered, I could watch I Am Cuba again quite easily. I could watch Battleship Potemkin easy. October, I might have to be drunk to watch again. But yeah, quite a lot of the ones we mentioned I don't ever want to watch. There's so many of the films we mentioned that are the propaganda ones, not the kind of comments on them, are just full of films I would, I'd really, really not want to ever see again. Like the Rambo films are probably weird because they have a good laugh. Because they're so absurd. It's like you can't take them seriously. I mean, Stallone's taking them seriously, but we were not, really.
I haven't seen the latest one.
Oh, it's good fun, pulp, trash. It's totally trashy. But I thought it was enjoyable trash. But if you're a Mexican, it's really racist. it's a really racist film. But it's one of those ones that's like I expected that from Rambo in the first place. It's just it's a bit fortunate to come out just after the Sicario films come out. And the Sicario films are really nuanced films, and these ones are Rambo versus drug dealers, and it's like, yeah, not very nuanced. Basically, it's Rambo blowing up brown people again. I mean, he blew up white people in the first one, and since then it's all been brown people he's been killing for like decades now. So there might be a bit of a race problem with the Rambo films. Just saying, there might be a slight. Every so often he kills a white Russian, but usually they're brown.
Maybe next time he will go against KKK or something.
That would be the best ending for a Rambo film, going against KKK.
Yeah. And that would be politically correct. So
yeah. I just didn't realize I was talking to. Yeah, there's a lot of brown people killed in the Rambo films. It's like, yeah, I don't really notice it during watching them, but yeah, there is.
I guess the Rocky films could also be seen as like an American dream propaganda.
Yeah, it beats up black people for the first 3 films.
Yeah.
It's getting really problematic here.
And then the funny thing is, Russian as well.
So the white Russian's the one It's the most propagandistic one, which is against Russia. So it's against Russia. That's when he finally beats up a white
That's
guy.
the most fun as well.
Yeah. Yeah, Rocky 4 is a lot of fun. It's so cheesy. It's just great fun.
Yeah, the training sequences are so badass.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's propaganda done best. I remember I saw that in cinema and everybody was going, Rocky, Rocky at the end when he was fighting Ivan.
Yeah.
And it was just like pure propaganda and everybody was enjoying it and no one was taking it seriously at all. I think some directors think the propaganda is more serious than it actually is. I think sometimes they think people are really into this and they're not really. It's just when you get to the Germans and the Birth of a Nation, that's when you should be worried because that's when they're really into it. You know, I think nowadays people are too ironic to really get caught up in all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's all subtle under the surface, so you can get caught up in. I think there's two people are aware of the obvious stuff now, but I think the subtle things are still going on.
And I think there are lots of those kind of more positive type of propaganda films, like Frank Capra. Again, it's that American Dream propaganda, showing that everyone can do well in their lives if they try hard enough and stuff like that.
Yeah, and because America thinks doesn't have a class system still, and it's like you really do. There's only like 1% who have all the money. It's a massive class system. Whoever's on top of the world has a class system because that's how they get to top of the world. It's just the way nature of the world. But apparently America doesn't have a class system. But
there are still, like, I think, more millionaires in America than anywhere else, like per capita as well. So I think there's some chance for people to still make it.
Yes, very, very, very thin. No, I mean it's pretty much non-existent. You know, unless you're in the arts or something, or unless you get lucky with an invention, you know, or lucky with whatever business you're working for, you can get. I think you get to a middle class level existence a lot of the time. But I don't think there's that much chance outside of luck, really. But I've just been cynical, you know. Maybe you're more you're young and idealistic.
Yeah, I have some trust in America,
Yeah.
Again, I obviously know that there are lots of problems as well.
Yeah, I'm old and cynical.
Yeah.
Right. I think we're going for over an hour and a half on propaganda. So I think we're getting stopped now.
Yeah, this is the longest podcast you've done, I think.
Yeah, hopefully. Thanks a lot for doing this podcast with me. It's been great fun. We managed to stay on target a lot more than Isaac did, I think.
Yeah.
So we blame Isaac for that, really. We can now agree that the last podcast was his fault.
Yeah. And it's because of him that we haven't done Vultures in a year.
Yeah, blame him when you go, blame him. So do you want to promote your channel before you go?
Yeah, so my channel is called SJSarts, and now I've kind of started doing streaming every Sunday, but I've had some problems with that, but hopefully I can fix the problems. But I will also do some videos soon, so look out for that.
Yeah. I was going to say this streaming when it works.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, well, thanks a lot, and thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back soon with some more videos. Tomorrow is Paddington.